Hey everyone, Switched here. I'm giving you 4 fictional, scary New Year's Eve stories, and I'm also hoping that everyone has a great New Year's Eve with family and friends who's watching the fireworks, just had a great time. I'm curious to see what the next year, 2024, will bring us. So once again, everyone, Happy New Year's Eve. Thank you for listening. At the celebrations of the New Year's Eve party for upcoming year 2018 was the most eventful and disturbing year celebration, not only for me but for my then fiance, now wife Isabella. We were invited by my best friend Jonathan's New Year's party at his place. We have been invited to his place for a few times before, like for Thanksgiving or Easter, some other holidays. And we were so looking forward to this. And even though at the beginning that was just a normal time, we'd arrived at the party around 10 p.m. and there were at least half a dozen people there, and we're just having a good time, drinking some, having some snacks, just conversation with other guests. And those who were invited were mostly people that I know, like old friends from work or high school or something. But there was one guy that I didn't recognize. His name was Ben, apparently. And Ben and Jonathan were actually co-workers at his place that he was working at. I did talk to Ben a little bit, and he seems to be a decent guy. But during the party, just before the midnight, I think it was around 11:30, something like that. Me and Jonathan were talking to some other old friends from high school, and well, Isabella were actually talking to some other people when Ben walked up to her. And, well, they were just having a decent conversation when he started to flirt with her. And she didn't take it kindly. She responded to him to saying that she actually was already engaged with someone else. And of course, he didn't believe her. Apparently, what she told me, he had been drinking a little too much at that point. So, at first, she couldn't see me where I was. At the time, I was actually in the kitchen with Jonathan and another two friend of mine, and apparently Ben didn't believe that I was her fiance or boyfriend. That was just a cover up she made. Apparently, but in his words, not hers. And he suggested that they should leave the party and go to his place to have some good time, in his words. But she refused. But then he got upset that he didn't get in his luck that he was hoping for. I mean, she is beautiful. Long brown hair, brown eyes, and just a beautiful girl. She was a beautiful young lady. But he then tried to grab her arm and she tried to snatch away from it and said, with a firm tone, to let her go. But it didn't actually happen though. He refused and got even more angry. And in fact, he started almost screaming at her. And then we heard it from even from the kitchen. I literally just poked out my head and saw what happening. So I walked up to Isabella and asked what's wrong. But Ben just looked at me with the red-filled eyes, and in his face was so red, not from just anger, and that he was wasted. Tell me to mind my own business. He was talking to this single lady that he was hoping to just get home with. He was trying to ask her out. But then I firmly said, dude, she is not single. She is my fiance. He starts screaming at me to believe it that this wasn't even proof. Then I showed her my phone with me and Isabella next to each other, but he said, that's photoshopped, that's photoshopped, that's fake. He screamed so loudly. Now Jonathan and the two other guys I was talking to in the kitchen came out and walked up to him and asked to calm down. This is a party, not to be something else. But he didn't listen. Then Jonathan asked me what was the matter. So I told him, and Jonathan he got really upset. He told Ben to simply leave his place. But Jonathan didn't he refused. He didn't even listen to him. So he told the other two guys behind him, just grab him and just throw him out. Which they did, and they locked the door so he couldn't get in. Well, Ben then kicked and banged on the door a few minutes before they just, well, simply walked off. And we enjoyed the rest of the New Year's party. I could see that Isabella was choking up. I mean, who could even blame her when a guy that was a little bit older than her, complete wasted, and if he had managed to grab her arm more tightly, he would easily been able to drag her out. If I wasn't even there with my friends, it's likely that he would have taken her away from me. And and for what Jonathan told me later on, Ben was actually fired. This was not the first time he caused any problem, because he literally showed up at work the next day, so complete hangover, and his boss had enough of his shenanigans like that, so he was fired. Jonathan was actually happy that because even though that they were co-workers, but Ben was not really the most well the employee of the month, so to speak. So Ben, I'm glad that you didn't do anything else with my fiancée, now wife. If you did, I would not have been hesitating to call the police on you. So if we ever run into each other again, which unlikely, just stay away from me and Isabella, but especially from her. At the New Year's celebration in Chicago in 2016 was the most eventful time in my life. I was born and raised and still living in Chicago though. My name is Emily. This particular year was the most eventful in my entire life, and I still remember it quite vivid even to this day. Even years before all this, I had no problem with the New Year's celebration, and even afterwards, I haven't. But I was a bit scared if this something would have repeated itself some years afterwards, and I was a bit hesitating to go into any New Year's parties, well, for a while after this. But you will eventually understand why. This happened, like I said, in 2016. Me and my boyfriend Jonas actually were invited to a New Year's party with some close friend of ours, and we were just having a good time. There were probably like 20 to 25 people. Another close friend of ours living a house, so the party was not only inside but also in the backyard. There were at least some barbecue and some drinks, and of course, we made sure none of us were too wasted. But at the party, there were not only some people that we knew, but there were some other people that we didn't know well. But there was one guy. His name was George. He was apparently a co-worker to one of my friends at this party. And she was actually the owner of the house. She had invited George from work because to her, he seems to be a decent guy, a little bit a lonely one, and he was only like 5 years older than me, and I didn't mind. And since Jonas was there, and he had a great time talking to some of our friends, and I was like, okay, I start to mingle around to talking to some of our old friends and get to know some other people. But then I started to have a conversation with George. We were just talking for what we thought of the year 2016 had been like for us, and what we're hoping for the year 2017 will bring us. We usually talked about like what we want to happen in the next year, and in that conversation eventually evolved into more flirtatious. He called me beautiful, which I didn't mind being called since I often been called that from my friends and family. But then he asked me if I was interested to maybe go out with him on a date after New Year's Eve. I was flattered, of course, but I told him I already had a boyfriend and he was actually at the party already. And he asked me to point him out. And as I was about to do it, Jonas was not even outside. So I said he's probably inside someone else of my friends. But apparently that didn't sit well enough for him, at least for George, because he said, he's probably inside when he made the quote with his fingers, saying, referring like, oh, I'm just made up Jonas. So he then went to offer me a drink, and he went to get something for me, but when he gave me an open bottle already, I said thanks, but I was had enough for myself, since I wasn't really much a big drinker, still aren't. Well, I drink a lot actually, but I didn't want to get too wasted for the party. And he just told me that I should just probably take it, but I said refused. And as I was about to leave, he yelled at me, "How dare you! I tried to be nice and give you a beer, but I just ignored him. I went inside, and for some reason, I didn't tell Jonas or any other friends about this first. But let's say I would have regret that in the end, because around the New Year's party I was about to watch the fireworks going off around midnight. I went back outside to talk to some friends and by standing up this open fire that he had made, and there was like like a small bonfire or something like that. But I was approached by George from behind. He apologized for what he said earlier, and I said, "That's fine. I understand if you were just felt a bit, well, if you felt a bit upset about something." And we talked about something else. But then he went back to his flirtatious once again, and he tried to ask me out again and again. I denied since I had a boyfriend. But he once again didn't even believe me. And then one of my other friends from work, who was also there, Lily walked up and he asked her if I actually had a boyfriend, and she said that I do have in fact a boyfriend, and that name was Jonas. But he didn't believe her either, because he said, "You probably told her to say that so that you will real seem to be real." I was dumbfounded. Why would I go so far to ask someone to lie for me? Because it didn't make no sense. And as I was about to say something else, he then said, but with more flirtatious but more sweeter voice as he said it, that he will make much better boyfriend than Jonas. Like, he will treat me like a queen, take me out everywhere I will go, and he will buy me things that I wanted. But I didn't get it at all. I told him no, firmly. And as I was about to leave, he grabbed my arm and said, "Please, let me give me a chance. You haven't gone and give me one?" I'd seen that he was a little drunk after all. And he didn't once again offer me to get a beer, or maybe something else. But before I could say anything, he just grabbed an open beer that he was having on a table next to us. And it turned out it was the same open bottle beer that he tried to give me earlier, and gave it to me. And I was like, "I'm sorry, I had enough," which was true. I wasn't had intention to drink that much that particular New Year's party. But he flipped. He told me he gave this beer just for me. But I said, "Thanks, but I'm not want to have any other beer like now. I don't want to get too drunk." And his words like, "I like and prefer women who's a little bit more loosened up and like mind, like you should be." I was dumbfounded once again. But before he could say anything, I turned around and quick walked away from that place. I went inside, to warm up some more, and I ran into Jonas and my friend, the owner of the house. This time I did tell them. Jonas was very upset, of course, about this, which no matter what I would try to do, but my friend, who did knew George, she told me that she had never seen like this before of him. So she and Jonas and I went outside, and when Jonas saw him, George walked up to me and asked for once again if I want to go out. But Jonas stood between us and said, "Dude, it's clear that she is not interested in you." And he was like, "And who are you to ask me that or say that to my face? Huh? You punk?" And I pushed like Jonas a little bit like lightly. Then Jonas like, "I, her boyfriend. So back off." And my friend who told George, "I told you, George, she is already taken." And it was true because apparently George had seen a photo of me on her phone with her, well, standing next to each other, and she had indeed asked her about me. And I once again told him, "Leave me alone." But George didn't listen. He tried to talk to me behind as I was standing behind Jonas as protection. But George didn't listen. And I told him, "Just leave me alone, you freaking creep." And it's true, he was creeping on me like that. And he started to get more upset about this. But before he could do anything, Jonas had his arm behind his back, and just told him, "If you don't listen, I will break your arm." Of course, he wouldn't break his arm because that would have been too bad. But he was already in some sort of pain, but George then apologized, and my friend told him to just leave, and that he's no longer welcome back to her place, or even try to talk to her at work, because she don't want to have anything to do with him ever again. So, well, it just happened. I told him, fine, and then he just left. Last I've heard from my friend about George. He still works there, but he's literally standing away from her, or at least avoiding her. But it's sometimes he had to work. But for the most part, he avoids her. A good thing too. And that was the last time I even saw of him. And good riddance. Because who knows what this guy would have been doing if I wasn't there at the party just by myself. If Jonas wasn't there, I have no idea if any other my other male friends at the time would have saved me or not. But I'm sure that they would have been. I mean, I trust them. So to Jonas, to George, stay away from me. Celebrating New Year's Eve has always been a great time. To just watch the exploding fireworks, but creating different colors of the night sky was like a magical feeling for as a young kid. But even as a young adult, I still had the same feeling. But as I grew up, I realized the danger behind of fireworks could cause. Like it could cause, well, disasters, like injuries and all that. Some people could blast off fireworks while they're drunk or something. That's dangerous. My parents told me always about this when I was getting grown older. If I want eventually doing this myself to blast off fireworks or anything like that, always make sure to be cautious. And I thank my parents for this early warnings and teachings that nothing happened to me. But there were at least one event that happened to me and my girlfriend Robin, and it happened around the New Year's Eve party that was going to celebrating for the upcoming year 2015, and we were invited to some a friend of ours to their house, and we were like maybe as 30 people there. They had this small bonfire at the backyard, had some serving some drinks and other snacks just to be more as like a party and to celebrate in the upcoming year. I mean, a lot of us were talking what did the next 2015 could bring us as the New Year's, like what mysteries will the next year will show us. And around New Year's time, around midnight, some people started already the fireworks, but our friends decided to wait just around maybe, just a few minutes before actual midnight. When that happened, some other people actually had brought their own fireworks and started shooting their own, which we didn't mind. But was one guy, Brandon. I didn't know him that well, but he was apparently an acquaintance to one of my close friends who lived at the house. He was actually only just about a year older than me. He was about the same age as Robin. He seems to be a decent guy because throughout the party he was just a normal guy. We had a lot of early conversation, but as the party was going on, he started getting more and more drunk apparently. But if I had known what he was going to do, I would have stopped him. You may understand why I want to stop him. He had brought his own fireworks, but he decided to shoot some of the fireworks thing from bottles, which you don't should do. And of course, me and some others told him to just not do that, but he ignored our warnings. But that was not the only thing that happened. Then he suddenly brought up a whole different kind of firework. You know those small, like rockets on a stick? Apparently, he had to put at least three types of these fireworks duct taped them together as to make it just a single one firework. And he lit all the three those fuses, and we like, Brennan, are you insane? We yelled. But apparently it was not too late for that. We were trying to stop him. But it was too late. The fireworks, well, let's say they did blast off. But it didn't blast off in the sky. It blasted off throughout the sky and it made like a U-turn middle of the sky and right into some bushes behind the house and start exploding and start fire. It literally started burning. It was next to my friend's house, and the house itself started getting on fire because the flames spread up to a window that was half open. Some of the curtains actually got fire. All of us were still panicking. Like, we were so off guard. And some of the people did call for 911, informing as quickly as possible. Some of us actually went behind the house, started to put out the fire with what we had, like the snow and even the water hose. And some other people actually who was inside was told of what happened. They went upstairs into that particular room and put out the fire as fast as they could. Soon, the fire department and the police and the ambulance arrived just in case if someone was hurt. Luckily though, no one was hurt. But the police investigated, questioned all of us who was there present, and I say this right now. All of us was not that wasted. All of us had some drinks, but Brandon apparently was the most wasted of all, because, well, he could barely stand. And when the police asked us who put out, or at least started this particular fire, or had it started, well, me, Robin, and a few others told out it was Brandon. Brandon denied he didn't do any such thing, but we do in fact had proof. And they asked what kind of proof. Our friend had security camera at the backyard because of a safety reason for their house. So they showed that it was in fact Brandon. The police could not deny it was him. The fire department managed to put out the fire, and luckily though, it was no any damage on the house. Only there was just like black of the light burning, but it was nothing that they couldn't just put out some new paint on. And and my friend were supposed to be repainting the house by the next year, so give them another reason. In the upstairs room, well, there was just some slight burns, and so Brandon was arrested for reckless endangerment, not only to the people at this particular neighborhood, but and well, another that, and he was paid to pay damage over the house. And well, there was actually my friend who knew Brandon from another acquaintance. Well, so my friend just simply cut all friendship with Brandon. And last I heard, Brandon was more like a recluse, like a shut-in, or he was more like well, a loner. This story about what Brandon did while he was so drunk is spread quickly. So people believed rather that story and his excuse that he didn't do it, there was actually someone else. But most of the people actually have been seeing the same recording. So yeah, so Brandon was a complete idiot when it happened. Not only that he almost damaged my friend's house, he could have risked not only ours, but the neighborhood's life as well. So, did Brent deserve what kind of punishment that he loses all his friends and all that? Well, I have to say, maybe it is possible that he should not be doing like that. But yes, he deserved to be punished like that. So, even though nothing bad happened, but Brandon, I hope you learn your mistake now in the future not to do any such idiotic, completely idiotic stunts ever again in the future. Hope for that. Celebrating New Year's Eve has always been one of the best times of the year. To watching the fireworks exploding with all kinds of colors and night sky, it was so beautiful. Even as a kid or as a young adult, still love it. Even though, regardless, I still love to watching the fireworks, even if it was New Year's Eve or 4th of July. But there's only one time of New Year's Eve that frightened me so much. It not only affected me, but also my husband, Simon. This happened around 2017, so at least a few years ago. I was actually invited to a New Year's Eve party by my childhood friend Becky and her husband Noah. We were just having a great time. There were like at least, I think maybe 40 or 45 people at most of the time there, and they had prepared some snacks and a lot of drinks like champagne, beer, or cider for those who wanted. Of course, not all the drinks were alcoholic ones. There are non-alcoholic drinks because we were just to be responsible adults for this. Of course, Noah and Becky had also planned to shoot some of their own fireworks. And as we were at the party, we were just having a great time. Just talking to some of the guests, some of the people that we knew. Some actually were old high school friends and even, well, elementary school friends that we hadn't seen in years. There was one guy, David. David was only 2 years older than me and Simon. At first glance, he looked to be just a normal guy. Apparently, Becky knew him from another acquaintance, so he was like an acquaintance to her. And I asked her a bit about him, what she knew about him. She didn't know much, only that he was a little bit odd. I asked what she meant by odd. Well, he talks a lot. Oh, he doesn't mind. He speaks us always on his mind, regardless of what his topic is. If it's politics, if it's about animal or romance. I'm like, oh, that kind of things. And I rolled my eyes. Like, she was like, yeah, it's, he's a unique character. I don't know him so that much, but I thought why not invite him for just to not be lonely for New Year's Eve. So, during the party, I did talk to David from time to time whenever we had time for it. And he did seem to be a very friendly guy. And since it was a bit cold outside, so Becky and Noah had made sure that the party was also indoors, like in the living room and the kitchen. Upstairs was off limits, of course. So, yeah, well, we're at the party, we're just having a good time, laughing, play some games or something. But around just before midnight, well, let's say David started to feeling a little bit handsy. Like he really started to put his hand on my shoulders, like, hey, you should drink this. He was apparently a little bit too wasted for much drinks. I tried to apologize for, or at least try to more, well, talk to him kindly to maybe to drop down or at least to not drink so much more. He, he didn't want to be passed out on the ground of the cold. But he just like, no, I'm not even drunk at all. I'm just, a little bit, I'm still sober enough. And, well, it was a complete lie. He was so wasted. Apparently, he couldn't even hold his liquor that well. So, and I was about to tell Becky or Noah about this, so they at least should be aware of this. But before I could do anything, David walked in front of me and asked if we could go upstairs in the house to have some fun. But I told him I'm not going to do that. And he asked me why. I told him I'm married and my husband is at the party. And he told me that, oh well, what happens, he didn't have to know. I was livid. He suggested that I cheat on my husband and that he didn't have to know. I told him firmly, you are not suggesting that, didn't you? He just laughed and said, yep, I absolutely did. And he was slurring with his words because he was so wasted. But I just like, no, I'm not interested, I said firmly and just tried to walk off. But he grabbed my arm and said, hey, what's so fast? You said that you were going after with me, didn't you? No. Oh, yeah, so you said yes. Great. I tried to get out of his grasp of my arm, but he was holding so tight, it didn't work. But eventually I managed to get my arm out of his grasp, and he then tried to say to me, why? Are you not interested in me? I'm a nice guy. I told him, regardless if you're a nice guy, I'm not going to do anything with you. I'm married and not going to cheat with my husband with you. And then he slapped my face because he took it as an insult. Do you dare to cheat on me? He apparently thought I was married to him. And people who saw this and even heard this slap on my face, and it was a clear red impression on my face as well. Not because of the cold, but also the handprint. It was so loud smack. I stood there dumbfounded. I didn't know what to do or even to say next, because I know that the next word or statement would trigger him even more, and who knows what else would do. Some people around us told him to just simply stay away from her, or stay away from me. But he didn't listen. He ignored them and yelled at me to take him back to our place, meaning to his place and mine, in his word, not mine. I was like still dumbfounded, but then suddenly he heard a voice in front from the door of the house. It was Noah. He told David, just back off. She's married, dude. But he didn't listen. Then Becky told him, David, if you're not letting her go, I will call the police on you. This is harassment. But David still didn't listen. Then Simon, as my true hero, ran the house up to me. Before he could say a single word, he yelled out in pain. And then we saw what had happened. It turned out David had a pocket knife on him, and he literally stabbed my husband from behind. And he still had the knife in him. He just let the knife stay in there. I turned pale. David just started laughing like a complete maniac, like, oh, this is the knight in shining armor you talked about. No, I'm your shining armor. Now, let us run away to live happily ever after. He joked, laughing like a complete maniac. But before he could do anything else, Noah tackled him to the ground, and a few other guys literally helped him to hold him down. David, or at least Simon, he was turning pale and was bleeding heavily. But luckily some of my friends did know a lot of how to take care of this, but they told them to leave the knife still there as Becky were on the phone for 911. Long story short, the ambulance arrived, police arrived, they arrested David and all this. Of course, he was arrested for an assault and attempted murder. Well, let's say he ended up being behind bars for at least a few years, and Simon though, yeah, he survived. Likely though, the stab wound wasn't even that serious, but he did need stitches, and every time when he went to look at the stitching, he will remember that particular New Year's Eve, and I will never forget it. Even after all this, did David learn from his mistake? Oh no, he didn't. He literally wrote me a few letters telling me that he truly loved me and I should leave the weak man and take him as my new husband, and that I will wait for him until he get out. Nope. I just informed the police and I had a restraining order against him. Ever since then, he hasn't even reached out to me, and I hope he stay away from me as well. Thank you all for listening to my story. I hope that everyone enjoys my 4 scary New Year's Eve stories that I brought for all of you. And I have to say, New Year's Eve has always been one of my favorite holidays. Just to be watching the fireworks of this night sky, it's an amazing feeling to see all that. It's beautiful. And I'm also curious to see what the next year, 2024, will bring all of us for all these mysteries. So all I want to say is, I really hope that everyone will have a great New Year's Eve with friends and family. And once again, Happy New Year's Eve, everyone, and happy 2024.